In this episode, we speak with Vic Svec, the Principal of Svec Consulting. Vic brings over 35 years of achievement in ESG investor relations and strategic communications, having led initiatives at Fortune 500 companies and top global consultancies. Most recently, he served as a managing director at Alvarez Marsal, where he led ESG Advisory Services. His corporate leadership spans 3 decades with global leaders including Brunswick Corporation and Peabody Energy. Vic was recognized as one of the top 25 sustainability consultants and leaders of 2024. Svec Consulting is a newly established advisory firm founded in 2024 to help companies unlock value through sustainability consulting, investor relations, and strategic communications. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow.
RJ Lumba is the executive chairman of Market Insight Media and managing partner of GrowthCap. He is the host of Top Consultant, a podcast featuring today's best consultants who advise and provide services to corporations, governments, nonprofits, and other organizations. Executives and key decision makers tune in to Top Consultant to identify the most knowledgeable and experienced consultants for their most important projects.
Vic, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you.
You as well. Thanks so much.
So where I'd like to kick off is your particular specialty in sustainability and ESG and the intersection with investor relations and communications. To set the stage for the benefit of our audience, tell us about your focus area, and then we'll go into your background.
Yeah, that sounds great. You summarized it well. I love the intersection of ESG/sustainability, along with the investor relations, which is a core stakeholder group for almost any company, and then corporate communications as well, because so much of what you do in the sustainability world is related to how you engage with your stakeholders around what you're doing and around what their priorities may be.
And you're now at your own consulting firm. You were previously with different corporations. I think most recently you were with a large consulting firm, Alvarez Marsal. Tell us about kind of your role at your prior firms.
Yeah, that sounds fine. So I've had probably 30 plus years with Fortune 500 companies. I was with Anheuser-Busch, Brunswick Corporation, as well as Peabody Energy. Very different industries, really growing up through the corporate communication side, investor relations, and then starting around 2005, what we called in those days corporate social responsibility, and frankly is probably not a bad enduring name for the discipline, and then over time started to call it sustainability and ESG, and now we're probably back to sustainability on that. But you're exactly right. I also helped found the ESG practice at the large global consulting firm Alvarez Marsal, a tremendous consulting company and one that I was proud to be with. These days, I am doing consulting with a company called Summit Strategy Group out of California, as well as doing consulting for a very large global energy company.
And is that the sector where you're most familiar and where you spend the most time? Is it in the energy sector or is it across the board?
I would say across the board, really any company can be improved through some of the practices of sustainability and ESG. I would say energy is one that probably gets a fair amount of focus because it is such an intersection, and really the resource space in general, particularly the environmental and the social kind of angles. And it's more complex than most people would appreciate, both in terms of the challenges and the benefits from the E and the S side.
And have you seen a marked change in how companies are approaching their ESG programs maybe over the last 10 years? I presume maybe there were some slow adopters or late adopters, and now it seems like almost everyone has some type of ESG program in place.
You're exactly right. I think we've seen a few dynamics occur, and we're probably in that sort of sustainability 3.0 kind of a realm these days. It started out with very much kind of a purpose-driven approach, which of course makes sense because in the ESG and sustainability space, we are certainly good advocates and practitioners of purpose-based organizations. Having said that, we moved then to more of a functional kind of approach, which is how do we do each of these elements, spelling out KPIs, goals that might be put into place, and the prescriptive kind of metrics in each area, calculating your greenhouse gas emissions and things. These days, we've moved more, I would say, to an advanced and an integrated model, which for those who are zealots, I think is a little disappointing. But frankly, I think it's a way where the integration becomes much more real for a company. And I like to put it in the two C words. One is compliance, and the other is commercialization. How do I do what I have to do, of course? And how do I make money? How do I create value out of sustainability? And to me, that's the area I really like to focus on the most because it's the most fun, it's the most strategic, and it's the one that's going to have more lasting value at the end of the day for a company, and therefore lead to the best outcomes for all of the various elements that are in place. So the commercialization to me says, let's take all of those ingredients in the refrigerator around ESG, and it's a funky lot, really, when you look at the various components of those. How do I make the best meals, to torture the analogy, in a way that can create value for a company? And value for a company is a very specific thing. How do I lower costs? How do I increase revenues? How do I improve my customer loyalty? How do I deepen my relationship with my stakeholders? How do I enhance my valuation? If I can't do those in a pretty tangible way, and tangible doesn't mean lofty, making the world a better place 30 years from now, then I'm not doing my job as a sustainability consultant or as a chief sustainability officer for a company. Mm-hmm. There are ways to do that. And we as sustainability consultants have to get better at those levers. It's not enough to say, let's save the world, let's be better people. This isn't a religion. It's an integrated discipline to help make companies better.
What I'm hearing is that there's two components of the value. There's the actual implementation of the sustainability practices that reduce the cost and maybe increase our revenue. The second piece is actually the telling of the story to the market. This is what we're doing as a company, and this is why you as investors or other stakeholders should like our company for the long term. Do I have that correct?
I would agree with that. And, it brings probably another hot topic to the table, which is that of greenwashing. Greenwashing is an interesting critique, isn't it? Because when a company goes out and undergoes a 10% cost reduction initiative, nobody ever says they're fooling the market around what they're trying to accomplish by that. And yet when people go out and say that we're trying to advance our environmental attributes or our social impact or our governance practices, that somehow we're doing that in a way to try to take out how people view us. So it comes from this interesting, like scolding, lecturing kind of a place, which again, to me, is fine for those who are zealots about it, but I think is an odd concept for companies. I think companies in general need to convey what they are doing to increase value, and that value over time has to be tangible and beneficial for their stakeholders. And doing that in a candid way, using the tools of communication, just makes good sense.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear an example where maybe it's like a more involved example where you were able to help a company. They had a particular issue or problem, or maybe they simply wanted to advance how they were approaching and evolve how they were approaching ESG that did turn into value creation in a meaningful way.
I think a good example is a company that was, fairly humble, private company, subsidiary of a large multinational company out there, and they made steel pipes for the fracking industry. So humble industry, feedstock into a controversial industry. And the CEO there was smart enough to realize that he thought there were some environmental advantages to the product that they had. And we helped them to quantify that and to show that all of the steel they were using for this pipe came from electric arc furnace. Electric arc furnace is a type of steel making that uses recycled steel, scrap steel. And by doing that, it has a 75% lower carbon footprint than original steel making. People need to make original steel, but in a country such as the US, there's a lot of recycled steel, scrap steel that can be used for that. So we dove into that with them on a couple fronts. The first was helping them quantify it, and it's about a 75% reduction in the carbon footprint from that type of process. So we helped to demonstrate that for their customers. But we also dove into a voice of the customer survey, talking to some of the large energy companies that purchase this. And we talked to their supply chain and their purchasing groups. And we said, A, is this important to you? And B, are you willing to pay more because of that? And the answer was interesting. Through interviews, they were saying, yes, we do care about it. We're being told by our management teams, now that we've gone and asked them, that we're going to care about it a lot more in 12 to 18 months. And we are willing to pay more for it, maybe 5 to 10%. So that was real solid and actionable kind of information. From there, we went back, shared our findings, obviously, with the company, dove into the kind of improvements that they could make in their overall quantification, in their communications, in the training of their sales force with their customers, and in the education. I mean, we had one purchasing manager who said, hey, look, I'm a pretty good salesperson. Give me the facts, and I'll be able to convey those to my management. And to the extent there's a good value proposition, we'll pursue that. Out of that really came a report from the CEO to his parent company in Asia, saying that thanks to our consulting with them, we had helped them on a $100 million ESG-friendly source of revenue over time and stream of revenue. So very positive result. Is it about saving the planet? Perhaps. But what it's really about, which is going to get far greater traction over time, is helping them create tangible value for their shareholders, for their investors, while doing the right thing.
Curious if you've had also examples on the social side, the S of the ESG or the governance that we could also highlight. I think it's sometimes harder to find those S examples. So curious if you have some you could share or have one you could share.
Yeah, had worked years ago with a large energy company around really telling the story of the basic value of the product to society. This was a traditional fossil fuel company, but I would note that fossil fuel companies haven't done the best of job over the years because they've largely viewed themselves as business to business, when in fact, in 2025, we are all business to consumer companies, regardless of what we're in, because of the enhanced nature of social media, the fact that ultimately everything reaches the end customer, and the end customer has an opinion and is willing to voice that opinion quite often and reach other shareholders. There are no pockets where you can hide away any longer anywhere in the world when there's information going on. So out of that came a recognition that, yes, environmental concerns, climate change are real. They are major concerns, but also access to affordable and reliable energy are major social concerns too. And helping to balance that and show that all energy sources are a choice, that there is no perfect source, that they all come with the yeah, but aspect on the environmental side as well as the social side. And being able to pull people out of poverty, for instance, the hundreds of millions of people, if not billions, that still rely on fuel wood and dung that are burned in unvented homes around the world. Those types of elements are important. So helping to balance the S and the E, I think, is always of value. And those who would say ESG is only about one side of the political spectrum probably aren't leaning into it in a way where they're focusing on both the opportunities as well as mitigating the risks for our company.
We're coming up on the tail end of the conversation. I have two final questions I'd like to end with. One is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
You know, I have thought about that over time, and there have been a number of people, both mentors, colleagues, and more aspirational people on the hill, if you will, the wise folks on the hill. I would probably cite Bjorn Lomborg. Bjorn was a founding board member of Greenpeace. He's someone who speaks and writes extensively. His original book was called The Skeptical Environmentalist, and he's been listed by Time Magazine and others as one of, really the great and unusual thinkers of the world. And his approach is a very pragmatic one. He blends kind of the philosophical with pragmatism. And his view is to say climate change, for instance, is a problem. It's not the only problem. We have enormous societal problems out there. Keeping the cold chain intact for vaccines to meet people is one of the best returns on investment we can make as humans, for instance, in preventing death and in improving health. And he also, years ago, led his group, the Copenhagen Consensus, which is a group of economists, to determine what the ROI was of all the Millennium Goals, which we now call Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So UN has a bunch of goals. Which ones make the most sense? Some return 10 cents on the dollar, some return $10 on the dollar. And he really evaluated where should our resources be going. So hoping to give clarity in a non-traditional, non-tribal kind of way that really cuts across political elements in a smart fashion is something I've always been attracted to.
Excellent. Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
Yeah, these days, so I live in St. Louis. I've been very supportive of the community over the years. United Way, the Science Center, the Chamber of Commerce. These days, I'm very focused on the Catholic Student Center and the Newman Center at Washington University. And, we have people who come from all over the world to attend WashU. And my wife and I have been very supportive of the Newman Center to provide a home within a home for those people to feel comfortable to worship, but also just to share in community there. We've been pleased to be recognized as the Newman Center Award winners for 2025, but would encourage anyone who has a chance to check it out and to support it.
Excellent. Well, Vic, I want to thank you again for taking the time to chat with us today. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Okay, thank you so much.